Sleeping Dogs came out on the 14th of August 2012. I'd have been like, what, 8? Man, I'm getting old. But today, I want to take a retrospective look back on this game, and how does it hold up by current standards, and is this game worth picking up in 2022? Over a decade since its original release date. Well, let's get into that. So, in order to dictate whether it's worth picking up by today's standards, we have to separate it into quite a few categories, and obviously the important ones are things like gameplay, story, graphics maybe, and just general mechanics of the game. So, we're going to separate these into a few categories throughout the video so it's nice and easy to follow along, and then we're going to give it an overall score of recommendation in 2022. Now understand that times change since games release, okay? And a game that may have been a 10 out of 10 back in 2004 might not be a 10 out of 10 in 2022. Things change, the gaming landscape changes, and you have to understand the score will be reflecting on how it is in today's standards, not how it was back then. So, let's get into it. So, the first thing I'm going to say is graphical quality. So, I played the Definitive Edition, which released in 2014. So, I want to just throw it out there, that's the edition I'm going to be basing it all off, as it is the widely available one now. And playing the old version is actually quite hard to find, and I'm not even sure if it's backwards compatible. So, I played the Definitive Edition on both my PC and my Xbox. Both, first of all, ran flawlessly, but second of all, I have to say the graphical quality really holds up by today's standards. The gameplay you're seeing is on my PC, and I think it was medium to low settings as my PC is not the best. And I have to say, it looks pretty good. Honestly, it holds up, okay? I'm not going to say it's going to blow you away graphically, but its art style and its charm is pretty much timeless. Now, am I going to say this is going to beat games out at the current time? You know, is this the best graphical quality I've ever seen in a video game? No, of course not. It came out in 2014, you know. But I will say, its standard and its quality has really aged well. You know, again, it's not perfect, and I don't think it's a flawless graphical experience, but I do think its charm and its kind of characteristics of its own game kind of holds up with its graphical quality it has, and I would give the quality, you know, a pretty good rating. Honestly, you could pick up this game and not feel like you're playing a game from the past, but playing a maybe an indie game of the current generation or a high-end game of the previous generation, which is what this was, and I don't think there's any shame in that. So next up, we're going to get into the gameplay. Now, this is obviously quite a big category and quite hard to really separate and differentiate different features, so I'm going to go for a few main ones for me. So, melee combat is really good in this game. Honestly, one of the best I've seen in pretty much any open world crime games. Really fun, really fluid, and quite frankly, it holds up remarkably well by today's standards. There's still a lot of fun to be had in just general fights, and quite frankly, after playing the entire game, I still find myself really enjoying the combat. And as you progress through the game, you discover more things about the combat, unlock more things and more moves, and quite frankly, it's just a really enjoyable experience all around with the combat. Except for gunplay. Now, moving away from the melee combat and going to ranged combat, gunplay, it's not very good, okay? There are parts where it is good. When you're diving over and you're in slow motion, you have full control. But I've got to say, the overall feel of guns in this game are quite tacky. It's not awful, okay? It's playable. You know, I'm not saying it's bad, but it's not very good. That's kind of where it is. It's a bit of a meh zone. You know, it's not very fluid. It doesn't feel very satisfying to kill people, unless you're using that slow motion thing when you vault over objects. And quite frankly, it's just painfully average. Not the worst thing in the world, and I don't think it holds back the game too much, but it's, you know, it's one of those things where there were room for improvement, and I think it's one of the things that does, you know, hold back the game maybe just a teeny bit. You know, modern games do handle gunplay a bit better, and it's just not too satisfying to do. But that's mainly my big gripe with the gunplay. This game anyway is mainly focused on melee combat, so you know, the rarity of guns is quite rare, and when you use them it feels like you're having just this short burst of pure anger and then you go back to melee weapons anyway. So yeah, it's not perfect, but you don't find yourself using them too much, and because they're so rare, you're excited to just use a gun, and I feel like it kind of distracts you from how bad the gunplay is. Just purely because of oh my god, I've got a gun finally. Now again, it's not downright awful, okay, it's very playable, and it is enjoyable. Don't think that it's bad, just a thing to watch out for. Another thing I'm not particularly fond of, but I don't think it's bad at all, definitely not as bad as the gunplay, is the driving in this game. Obviously, playing in Hong Kong, the streets are quite cramped and crowded, and you find yourself crashing into things a bit more than other games, as there's just not quite enough wide streets. It's not really a fault of the developers, it's just because the game is set in this place, which is beautiful, by the way, we'll get to that. But I do feel that driving can become a bit slippery, and there's certain moments where I wish the camera would be more zoomed out and stuff. Like in the action hijacks, I feel like the camera's really zoomed in and I struggle to see what I'm doing. And the driving at times, it feels like I take a turn and I'm going to crash regardless. Braking and turning feels really stiff and like hard to do, and it's just not the most fluid thing in the world, but it does its job and it does it pretty well. It's not awful, okay? Driving is fun and you can have a ton of fun driving. Races is where this really shines, when you're racing and you have a nice car, and I will say the higher end cars are much more enjoyable to drive, as they should be, than lower end cars. I feel like it's very enjoyable for the most part, but when you're trying to just drive clean and not crash into things, I do find myself struggling. But that might just be a me issue and not really a game issue. It's just in my gaming experience this game, and I've put a lot of hours into it. I find myself still struggling to fully pick up the driving. Although the side swipe mechanic, which came back in the recent Saints Row, is just as enjoyable as ever. So those are the two real bad parts about this, and that's pretty much it. Moving on to the map. The map is fantastic. Quite frankly, I love every single part of it. It is beautiful, no place is the same, and it's not the biggest thing in the world, but it's not small by any stretch of the imagination. Tons of little secret, tons of little islands you can go to, and it's just overall a really enjoyable experience. There are a lot of collectibles around the map too, which are really fun to find. Health shrine, little boxes you have to open, and pretty much everything else you can find in the game is really enjoyable, as well as going around and doing favours for people to earn more respect, or face value, as you would like to call it. It's a really enjoyable map to go about, and I think it's the perfect sandbox for a game like this, and I will say the map adds to so much of its charm. It's unreal, and it's just beautiful. Again, the graphical quality of this map, it's not like the most next-gen thing in the world, but it looks so good by today's standards still. Again, it's not mind-blowing, but it just holds up so remarkable. And in my opinion, the map is really good and one of the highlights of the game. Customization isn't the best, but it's not too bad. Not many options for Wei Shen himself to be customized, but I understand that that's kind of necessary for the way the game has its style. He's a police officer, he needs to have a certain haircut, he needs to have a certain build type, and obviously it kind of wants to limit it so it fits the story. Totally understand it, and I quite like it. Outfits, however, you have quite a bit of customizability, and one thing I do like is that certain outfits give you certain abilities. Nothing crazy, nothing ridiculous, but something really enjoyable, and it's a small feature, but it's one that I like. The missions are really good. Like, seriously, they're really good, really enjoyable, not super similar. It's not just run here, shoot everyone, run here, fight everyone. There's lots to it, as well as having different cases to discover it. It's a really enjoyable story, and that obviously brings us to the next point. The story. What's the quality of this story by modern standards? It's phenomenal. Like, honestly, it is one of the best stories I've played in the game in a long time. I'd say it rivals games like Saints Row 2. And that's me being honest. In fact, I would almost go as far as to say it's got a better story than Saints Row 2, even though I found myself more connected to maybe the Saints Row games as a whole, due to me enjoying them as a kid. I wonder if this story, is on par with Saints Row 2, is better, worse than Saints... Who knows, okay? You have to play it for yourself to dictate that. All I'm here to say is the story is amazing, seriously good, and if you're looking for a kick-ass, dark, deep, emotionally cliff-hanging story, Sleeping Dogs is it, and by today's standards, it's still fantastic. Not the longest thing in the world, but definitely not the shortest. You're not going to be leaving at the end of it going, wow, I wish there was more, because there's the DLC as well, which I'm yet to play, so I won't comment on it. But I do have to say that the story was decent in length, and phenomenal in quality. And anyone who disagrees, you're welcome to. All I know is that my experience with this game was fantastic story-wise. Absolutely adored it. The characters also, super memorable, super lovable. You feel a bit of an attachment to each and every one. You like the bad guys, you like the good guys, all because of how well their characters are done, and it makes you really want to punch the bad guys in the face, and when you do it, that much more satisfying. You really hate it when you hate someone in this game, and you love the people you love. It's a weird game in the sense that it makes me feel really invested in characters, and my emotions are conflicting every single mission when something changes. It's just good. It's just a well-written, well-executed story, and it should be the basis of what any open world crime game wants to be. I'm looking at you, other games out there. Movement can be a bit slippy at times, which I feel like might just be the style of the game, but parkour is quite fluid and it is quite enjoyable. Traversing the map has never been so good in the game, and I mean, it's just as good as pretty much any other game that follows this format. It's no better, it's no worse. I think it's a very good format to follow, and I don't think there's anything wrong with just being good, okay? Again, it's not like the most revolutionary thing in the world. It's got some parkour elements, got some climbing elements, but typically it's just your standard open world crime game, and that's fine. That's completely fine and completely acceptable for a game these days. Not every game has to be a masterpiece in every single way. Some things are okay with just being okay, and I think that that's one of them. But I suppose that kind of brings us to the end of this video and brings us to the point of us going, is this game worth picking up in 2022? As you can probably tell by this review, I've been unbelievably positive, and that's because my recent experience with this game, it hooked me like nothing else. I've never felt this attached to a game so fast again, and I fell back in love with Sleeping Dogs. It's been a few years since I last played it. I don't even know when I last played it, but man, I'm going to be playing this one for a while, and I'm going to be coming back to this one a lot. It's just, to me, it's just such a shame we'll never get a sequel, as I stated in my previous video, because if any game deserved a sequel, it was this one. Some games are masterpieces. I would go as far to say this is one, and I don't say that lightly. There's not many games out there I would consider a masterpiece, I feel. You know, Skyrim, Sleeping Dogs, Saints Row 2, you know, games like that. That standard of quality where you just take a step back and appreciate what has been done here. And this is one of them. Oh, and did I mention that this game regularly sells for under $5? Under £4 if you live in the UK? What a steal, what a bargain. Right now it's on sale. I picked it up for $2 on Steam. Insane. And I paid like £3 for my copy on Xbox too. It's a steal. And not to go full woke sell it shill on you here, I recommend you all go and buy it and give it a chance. What have you got to lose? Even if you don't like the story and you don't like the tone, you've still got a badass world to explore that's beautiful and combat that's really fluid and fun for $3. That's cheaper than Game Pass. Go get it. That's my recommendation. So, what would I rank this game out of 10 in 2022? It's a tricky one, because there are definitely a few things out there that are not perfect with it. Again, the driving's a bit off. The shooting is a bit off. But does it detract from the overall product? That is the question. And does it hold back the game in modern standards? I don't think so. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 recommendation. It's good. It's really good, and it's really worth it in today's standards. It's not perfect, but it is pretty damn close. So, yeah. By today's standards, pick it up. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.